I am Fallon Whitaker, 30 years old women. I was supposed to start graduate school at Columbia this fall, using the $220,000 my parents set aside for me since I was 10. What I discovered instead shattered everything I believed about family. The last morning before my life collapsed was so ordinary, it almost felt cruel in retrospect. Sunlight spilled through the Brooklyn apartment window like it had every day since I moved in 2 years earlier. My cat, Pico, pawed at my feet for breakfast, and the sound of buses below echoed through the open slats of my blinds. I'd made a routine out of quiet, wake early, black coffee, no sugar, one boiled egg, 5 minutes of meditation I always hated but forced myself to do. On that morning, my phone buzzed with an email. Congratulations, Columbia SIPA Fall Cohort Welcome Packet inside. I stared at the screen for a full minute. My hands trembled when I tapped the attachment. I blinked as I read the words. Accepted fully. I pressed the phone to my chest, my breath shaky. I could hear my heart pounding through my ribs, feel it tightening in my throat. After everything, the GRE retakes, the nights I cried in front of my laptop, the years working underpaid nonprofit jobs to make my statement stand out, I had made it. Columbia, my dream program, foreign policy and development. And the plan, the meticulous 20-year plan I'd clung to like a life raft, was falling into place. The college fund my parents had started for me when I was 10 had grown to $220,000. They'd always emphasized that it was mine, set aside for future academic use. I used a fraction for undergrad, then promised myself I'd wait for the right graduate program. This was it. I called Mom immediately. Fallon, she answered on the second ring, breathless. Is it here? It's here, I whispered. I got in. She screamed, actually screamed. I laughed, my chest tight and warm. Oh, honey, she said, breathless. Your father and I, we knew it. I need access to the trust next week, for deposits, housing, all of it. Then came the pause. A long, long pause. Fallon, she said carefully, we need to talk about the fund. My stomach flipped, a slow crawl of dread crept up my spine. What do you mean? It's complicated. I went cold. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, clutching my phone tighter. Complicated how? There was silence, then her voice softer, guiltier. Marla needed help. I stopped breathing. Your sister, she continued. She went back to school, Fallon, Stanford, MBA. She said it was urgent, that she needed a clean start after everything with Peter. We thought you wouldn't mind. You thought, I said, my voice was a whisper. You were still figuring things out, she continued. You hadn't used it in years, and I was already standing, packing the room. My hand trembled as I pressed the phone to my cheek. How much is left? More silence. Mom, I snapped, how much? About 14,000. My knees buckled. I sat on the hardwood floor, breath catching in my throat. 14,000, I repeated, out of 220. She promised to pay it back, my mother said quickly. She got financial aid, She knew, I whispered. What? She knew it was mine, I said louder now. She didn't just borrow it, she stole it. I wouldn't use that word. Well, I would. I hung up. The silence in my apartment roared. I stared at the walls, at the sunlight, at Pico, who meowed softly, sensing something in me had broken. I sat there for hours. Later that night, I tried to email Columbia and ask for a deferment. I told them I was facing unexpected financial restructuring. They granted it, a 1-year hold. I cried when I got the response, not from relief, from shame. The next day, I pulled out every document I had, college fund paperwork, trust agreements, screenshots of conversations from years back where my parents confirmed the account was untouched. I created a timeline. I wasn't grieving anymore, I was planning. Marla had always been the magnetic one, the spotlight girl. In high school, she was prom queen, debate captain, cheer captain, the whole dream. I had been the quiet one, the binder girl, the one who kept everything together. And they praised me for it, for being low maintenance, for not needing constant attention like Marla. Now I realized they mistook silence for compliance. She hadn't just taken my money. She had walked into my future like it was a showroom and stolen the keys. I looked her up. Her Instagram was full of shiny photos, campus photos, Hashtag Stanford MBA, new friends, new coffee shops, new identity. No mention of me, of the fund, of where she'd come from. She'd rebranded. And I was collateral. That's when I made a decision. If she could take my life, I would take hers. I spent the next 2 weeks researching Stanford's mid-year admissions. I reached out to an old professor at Columbia who had recently transferred to Stanford's policy program. I told him I was considering applying. He offered to write my recommendation immediately. "You'd be an asset," he said. "You're exactly the kind of mind we need here." I submitted my application within a month. I tailored my essays around themes of ethical mismanagement, personal reinvention, and the emotional cost of navigating elite education as a woman without privilege. All true, though coded. I got a call back. They invited me to visit the campus for a personal interview and class audit. And that's when it all became real. I flew to California. I booked a modest Airbnb. I took the same routes Marla probably did every day. I walked her world like a shadow. And then I saw her. It was late afternoon. She stood outside the Graduate School of Business, laughing too loudly, her head thrown back. She looked thinner, polished, overly put together, as if she were sculpting herself into someone else. I stood behind a tree across the courtyard and watched. She didn't see me. Not yet. The next day, I walked into the same lecture she was attending. I sat 4 seats behind her. When she turned and caught my eye, her smile faltered. "Fallen," she mouthed, barely audible. I smiled tight and sharp. She froze. That evening, I filed an anonymous report with Stanford's ethics office. Misappropriation of financial declarations, misuse of protected funds, potential misrepresentation during application review. I attached documents. I didn't sleep that night. But I didn't regret it either. Because I had stopped being quiet. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. And I was just getting started. I didn't sleep the night I filed the ethics report. Instead, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me, listening to the eerie hush of Palo Alto at 3 a.m. Every passing car felt like a threat. Every creak of the walls made me sit up straighter. I wasn't afraid of being caught, not really, but my body was still wired for survival. As if something in me knew that once you fire the first shot, the war doesn't end. It escalates. And this wasn't just any war. This was blood deep. By morning, I had practiced what I'd say if questioned. I kept my words sterile, factual, controlled. I reminded myself I wasn't making things up. I had the documents, the fund statements, the emails, the screenshots of transactions. My parents' awkward texts confirming Marla's temporary use of what they once called Fallen's future. She didn't just borrow my money. She usurped my life. I dressed sharply for my audit class that morning, nothing flashy but deliberate. A navy blouse with gold buttons, dark jeans, hair back, minimal makeup, just enough to say I belong here. When I entered the classroom, my heart thudded against my ribs. The space smelled like coffee, faint perfume, old whiteboard markers. Students were scattered across rows in business casual clothes, typing noiselessly into sleek laptops. Everyone looked so polished, so unaware. Except her. Marla. She sat in the middle row, flanked by 2 other women I'd seen on her social media. Her hair was curled perfectly, her nails painted in a delicate nude shade. Her mouth moved as she laughed at something, the kind of open-throated, performative laugh she'd always perfected. I slid into a seat 3 rows behind her. She hadn't noticed me yet. But then halfway through the lecture, her shoulders stiffened. She turned, just a glance over the shoulder, casual but searching, and our eyes met. It happened in a flash. The moment recognition bloomed across her face, followed immediately by panic. Her hand twitched on her pen. She looked away so fast it was almost comical. After class, I didn't approach her. I let her simmer. I walked out with confidence, holding my head high as if I owned the entire school. Back at the Airbnb, I opened my laptop and saw a new email from the Stanford Graduate School Ethics Review Committee. It was brief. "We have received your documentation and will begin an internal investigation. Please do not disclose this matter to any involved parties during this period. We may request additional information." No signature, just a seal. That was it. The match was lit. But even fire needs air. I spent the next 2 weeks learning the contours of her new life, not obsessively but with strategy. I noted what cafes she frequented, which professors she adored, who she sat next to most often. I built a quiet map, one that showed me where to press, where to appear, where to vanish. I knew how she operated. She always crafted her identity like a brand, aspirational, curated, inflated. She didn't lie so much as recreate. She took traits she admired in others and stitched them onto herself like borrowed clothing. That's how I knew she'd be watching me now. And sure enough, the call came. Fallen. Her voice was sharper than usual, almost brittle. I was wondering when you'd finally reach out, I said evenly. She paused. I saw you in Langston's class. Are you transferring? I took my time. I'm considering it. Why Stanford? I let the question hang in the air, then said, I figured I'd visit what's left of my future. You don't need to be dramatic, she snapped. I'm not, I said calmly. You already took care of that part. A breath. So this is what, a vendetta? You're stalking me now. I smiled coldly. If I wanted to stalk you, Marla, I wouldn't be so obvious. She went quiet. Then she tried a new tactic, softening. I never meant to hurt you. You never meant to be caught, I corrected. Fallen, come on, she hissed. You're my sister. I exhaled slowly. Exactly, and that's what makes this unforgivable. Click. I ended the call and set the phone down like it was venomous. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. Still, something gnawed at me. I wasn't just stepping into her world, I was dismantling it. And part of me still carried a residue of guilt, like muscle memory from years of being the understanding sister. But guilt was a luxury for people who hadn't lost everything. I met with Professor Langston 2 days later, the same class she'd taken, the one where I had audited twice already. He asked if I was planning to apply formally. I'm considering it, I said. Your audit essays have been impressive, he said. You've got a sharp voice, especially in ethics. The committee likes clarity. Clarity, I echoed. That's what I'm here for. He smiled, not understanding the layers. After that, things accelerated. Marla's social media shifted. Her photos slowed. The glowing captions dulled. The filtered images turned into grainy reposts of study groups and campus events she wasn't in. Then she disappeared entirely. I didn't see her for a week then too. Until one Thursday I walked past the outdoor cafe near the quad, the one she used to brag about working from, and saw her sitting alone. Hoodie, no makeup, her eyes red-rimmed, her laptop closed. She looked up and saw me. She didn't look away. Our gazes locked and stayed. And for the first time, she didn't mask it. She looked afraid. Not of me. Of herself. That night, I received an email from the ethics office. Your documentation has been reviewed. Disciplinary action has been issued. Please be advised that this information is confidential and will not be reflected in your academic standing. I read it twice. No fanfare. Just quiet justice. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I simply closed the laptop, leaned back, and breathed. Because this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. A week later, Stanford formally invited me to interview for a mid-year transfer into their policy and ethics graduate program. They cited a unique perspective on institutional accountability and systemic equity. They didn't mention Marla. They didn't have to. I sat at the edge of my bed, clutching the email with both hands. I thought of the little girl who stayed silent in every argument, who always gave up the last piece of cake, who let her sister shine even when it burned. She wasn't here anymore. In her place sat a woman. And that woman was done being erased. The email sat open on my laptop long after the screen had dimmed. Stanford's invitation to formally interview was short, clinical, but it held the weight of an earthquake in my chest. For days, I'd wandered the GSB halls like a ghost in someone else's life. But now I was being offered the keys to the very world she'd stolen. And all I had to do was step inside. The morning of my interview, the fog clung low to the sidewalks. I dressed in a dark charcoal suit, crisp white blouse, and the simple silver earrings my father gave me when I graduated undergrad, the ones he said made me look like a woman with something to say. Outside the administration building, I paused. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Inside, the waiting area smelled faintly of citrus and new carpet. A soft hum of a printer echoed from a nearby office. My hands were folded neatly in my lap, back straight, heels planted. The receptionist called my name. "Ms. Whitaker, they're ready for you." I stepped into the room. 3 people sat behind a long conference table, Professor Langston on the left, a sharply dressed woman from admissions in the center, and on the right, a man with kind eyes and a folder already open with my name tabbed on top. They welcomed me, smiled. Asked about my prior work, why Stanford, why now. I told them the truth, most of it anyway. I believe institutions matter, not because they're perfect, but because they shape lives. And when one person manipulates those systems, when a structure fails to protect the people it was built for, it doesn't just break policy, it breaks trust. I want to work where trust can be rebuilt. Professor Langston gave a slow nod. "You've clearly thought deeply about this," the admissions officer said. I met her eyes, I've lived it. We wrapped 20 minutes later, polite handshakes, warm smiles. I left without looking back. Outside, the fog had lifted. 2 days later, my phone buzzed during a walk past the business school courtyard. An email from Stanford. "We are pleased to offer you admission to the GSB mid-year graduate transfer cohort." I stopped walking. The world tilted gently under my feet, not like it used to when things went wrong, but like something just realigned. I had done it. I had taken my place, not by deceit, not by force, but by truth. And now the life Marla pretended to live. It was mine. But just as I reached that mountaintop, she fell. Hard. It began with whispers, soft ones at first, a missed presentation, a class she didn't show up for. Her usual table at the cafe sat empty for 3 days straight. By Friday, people were asking where she was. By Monday, she was gone. No official announcement, just an absence, a void where she used to be. Her friends stopped tagging her in photos. Her LinkedIn profile went private. Her name vanished from the course roster. And then I got the call. Not from her. From my mother. "She's home," Mom said, her voice small. "Since when?" 3 days ago. She packed up in silence, didn't tell anyone, just showed up. I sank onto my bed. "How is she?" "She's quiet," Mom said, "doesn't eat much, doesn't come out of her room." I didn't say anything. "Fallen," she added, "she looks hollow." I clenched my jaw. "She drained my future, Mom," I said slowly. "She walked into a life that wasn't hers and left it in ruins." "I know," Mom whispered, "but she's still your sister." That sentence, "she's still your sister," hit me like a cold slap. Because I didn't know what that meant anymore. Back at campus, I continued forward. My new cohort welcomed me slowly but respectfully. I was quieter than most but deliberate in everything I said. Professors appreciated my clarity. Students trusted my insight. I didn't rush to network, I built carefully. I didn't need to shout anymore. People listened. And yet I still caught glimpses of her. In the back of the auditorium when I presented. In the reflection of glass doors. In the space I now occupied fully, cleanly, a life that had once belonged to both of us, until she forged ahead and forced me behind. Then came the voicemail. One night, after a long study session, I came home to find my phone buzzing with a missed call and an audio file. Her voice low and flat. "Fallen. I know what you did. I know you were the one who reported me. But this isn't about the money anymore, or the program, or even the ethics board. You took my world. But you'll never be me." There was a pause. Then the click of her hanging up. I stared at the phone in my palm. It wasn't rage I felt. It was pity. She still didn't get it. She thought I wanted to be her, that this was a swap, a battle, a one-for-one trade. But I didn't. I wanted her out of the way, yes. But not to become her. To become myself. She didn't understand the difference. And maybe she never would. That night, I took a long walk under the lamplight of Stanford's eucalyptus-shaded paths. The breeze was cool against my face. My heels clicked against the cobblestone as I passed students laughing in clusters, sipping late-night coffee. And for the first time, I smiled. Not because I had won, but because I had finally shed the need to explain myself, to her, to my parents, to anyone. My name was my own again. My future earned. Not stolen, not borrowed, not inherited. Mine. The first time someone referred to me as a rising star in the Stanford GSB program, I laughed. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I finally did. It happened after a policy seminar on educational resource misallocation. I'd stayed after class to clarify a point about public versus private partnership accountability when Professor Rowe leaned over her desk and said, "You know, Fallen, some students study the system. Others understand how it breathes. You're the latter. You don't just learn, you lead." She said it so casually, like she didn't just crack something open inside me. I walked out of the building into the late California afternoon, the sky a soft watercolor blend of rose and peach, and I finally let the moment wash over me. I wasn't a placeholder. I wasn't a fluke or a plot twist in my sister's failed narrative. I was here fully, and people were beginning to notice. The life Marla had pretended to live, sleek LinkedIn captions, curated brunch photos, vague references to impact and resilience, I was building it for real, from the ground up. And it wasn't flashy. It was solid. I joined the university's Ethics and Policy Society and quickly found myself nominated as vice chair. I attended think tank panels, met quietly with international consultants, and even contributed to a white paper on digital equity across U.S. school districts. Every week, it felt like another door opened. Another room I used to peer into now had a chair waiting for me. Still, the irony was never lost on me. All the things Marla had tried to conjure, she'd done so with shortcuts and filters. I was doing it with sweat, silence, and sharpness. One evening, while reviewing notes for an upcoming campus forum, I stumbled across a photo on my cohort's shared drive. It was from a mixer event I'd half forgotten, snapped without me knowing. I was mid-conversation with a visiting IMF guest, my eyes lit, a hand raised slightly for emphasis. Behind me were 4 other classmates laughing at something I just said. I stared at it. And for the first time, I saw myself the way others did. Poised. Present. Real. I saved the photo quietly and closed the laptop. But not everything was a highlight reel. Marla still lingered like a half-faded bruise, no longer aching, but not fully gone. Her text came out of nowhere, a single sentence. "Enjoy the view from my seat." I didn't respond. She followed up. "You're good at playing the part Fallen, but just remember you're still living in my echo." I stared at the words, my fingers hovering above the keyboard. Then I deleted the thread without replying. Because I wasn't in her echo. I was in her absence. And those aren't the same thing. But even as I pushed forward, something deeper started forming inside me, a kind of quiet clarity I hadn't expected. That I didn't just want to be better than her. I wanted to become something she never had the patience or humility to be. A builder, not a performer. That clarity sharpened the night I met with Ryan again. We, grown closer in recent weeks. Late-night library sessions turned into shared takeout dinners, which turned into unspoken rituals, sitting in the quad under the eucalyptus trees after class, letting silence say what we weren't ready to yet. He was nothing like the men Marla used to parade around. He was present, curious, grounded. "You're not like anyone I've met here," he said one night, watching me as we passed a warm paper coffee cup between us. "You mean I don't post selfies with motivational captions?" I teased. He smiled. "You don't market yourself, you just are, and people notice." I shrugged. Visibility's a double-edged sword. "You scared of it?" I thought for a long moment. "No," I said, "I'm scared of forgetting why I wanted it." He nodded slowly. "Don't, the why is what makes you unstoppable." And with that, something in me softened. Not everything had to be a fight. Some things like grace, like presence, were just earned in quiet ways. Weeks passed. I presented a proposal to the campus board about restructuring the mentorship program to include underrepresented transfer students. I submitted my final packet to the World Bank for summer internship matching. I was invited to speak at the winter networking dinner. And then the photo happened. I posted it. Just one. Me standing outside the Stanford GSB sign in a dark green jumpsuit, hair swept back, no caption but the date. 3 hours later, Marla viewed it. I didn't need a comment. Her silence was loud enough. The dinner was held at a rooftop venue overlooking the Palo Alto skyline, all glass panels and candlelight, strings of soft bulbs overhead. Jazz filtered through the speakers as people drifted from group to group. I arrived alone. But I didn't feel alone. I felt whole. A professor I deeply admired pulled me aside near the dessert table. "I've seen a lot of students talk about ethics," she said, "but not many live it. You do." I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes, but I held them back. Instead, I said, "I used to think ethics was about rules, but it's about reminders of who we are when no one's watching." "Exactly," she said and handed me her card. That night I walked home barefoot, heels in hand, the Stanford air cool against my cheeks. I thought about everything that had happened. About the theft, the fallout, the silence, the slow, grueling rebuild. And I whispered to myself, "You didn't just take her place. You became the woman she was trying to fake." The invitation sat unopened on my desk for 3 days. The Stanford Graduate School of Business's annual winter networking dinner was a landmark event. Alumni, recruiters, faculty, sponsors, and this year, selected students who had demonstrated remarkable ethical leadership. My name was on the list. I stared at the embossed envelope, fingers tracing the gold trim. It should have felt like triumph, validation, a milestone I once imagined Marla reaching before me. But instead it felt complicated. The last time I'd been in a room like that, Marla had been the one draped in champagne silk, laughing too loudly, waving at donors like a homecoming queen. Now it was my turn. And for some reason, I wasn't sure if I wanted it. The anxiety sat in my throat like a stone. Then came a text from Ryan. "Heard about the dinner. If you're going, I'm wearing gray. Thought I'd warn you in case you plan to steal the show in the same color." I stared at the message, then slowly smiled. He always knew when to push just enough. "Guess I'll wear green," I wrote back. Like growth. I spent that afternoon getting ready slowly, deliberately. I pulled my dark green jumpsuit from the back of my closet, the one I'd worn that day I first stepped onto Stanford's campus. The one that made me feel less like someone trying to prove she belonged, and more like someone who knew she did. I wore my hair in a clean knot, no dramatic curls or flashy clips. Minimal makeup, one silver ring, my father's tiny gold watch, the one he'd given me when I left for Columbia before everything fell apart. When I stepped outside, the evening air carried that crisp winter sharpness that makes you breathe deeper. Downtown Palo Alto glittered. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was walking into someone else's scene. This was mine. The dinner was held on a rooftop venue framed with glass and copper. Soft jazz drifted through the air. Champagne flutes clinked. Waiters moved through clusters of people with trays of scallops and fig-glazed bruschetta. I recognized faces, some I'd presented with, others who'd interviewed me, a few who had once only known me as Marla's sister. Now they knew my name. Fallon Whitaker. The woman who exposed a flaw in the trust. The woman who didn't flinch when the spotlight landed on her, not as scandal but as story. I found Ryan near the corner, talking to a visiting analyst from the IMF. He looked up, his face breaking into a slow, warm smile. "Told you," he said, eyes tracing the green silk. "Growth looks good on you." "You clean up well yourself," I said, sipping from a flute he handed me. He didn't ask if I was nervous. He didn't need to. Instead, he whispered, "When you speak tonight, don't hold back." "Who says I'm speaking?" "Everyone." And sure enough, 20 minutes later, a coordinator tapped me on the shoulder and guided me to the back of the terrace, where the small podium had been set up. The air was still, the night quieted. A microphone clicked. The MC stepped forward. Tonight, we highlight one student whose work, journey, and voice have shaped how we talk about ethics not just in theory but in action. Please welcome Fallen Whitaker. Applause. Not thunderous, but real. I stepped forward, my heart pounding not from fear, but from recognition. This wasn't about Marla anymore. This was about me. I cleared my throat and began. I didn't plan to speak tonight, but I realized that when we talk about ethics, we often treat it like a textbook, a series of rules, neat and numbered, meant to keep us safe from mistakes. But the truth is, ethics isn't about avoiding missteps. It's about deciding who we are after we've been tested. The crowd leaned in. I was tested by someone close to me, someone I trusted, and I could have stayed quiet. It would have been easier, cleaner, but silence doesn't protect the vulnerable, it protects the powerful. A beat. I chose to speak. And in doing so, I lost something. I lost a version of my family. I lost the idea that justice would feel like joy. It didn't. It felt lonely, heavy, but necessary. Faces in the crowd, even the skeptical ones, softened. And I stand here tonight not as a victim or a whistleblower or a headline. I stand here as a woman who refused to be erased, who demanded her seat back, and who's ready to build longer tables so no one else has to fight that hard again. I looked out across the room. And then I said quietly, I took my place and I intend to keep it with both hands. Silence. Then applause. Then more. It grew. I stepped away from the podium, exhaling fully for the first time all night. Ryan met me at the stairs. He didn't say anything. Just held out his hand. I took it. Later that night, after the dinner, after the handshakes and business cards and congratulations, I sat alone on a bench outside the venue. I scrolled through my phone and saw a message from an unknown number. I heard the speech. You didn't name me. You didn't need to. I see it now. I was trying to be a version of what you've already become. Marla. I stared at the message for a long moment. I didn't respond. Not out of malice. But because some answers don't come in words. They come in becoming. The Monday after the dinner, I woke up before my alarm. Not because of nerves, but because something in me was shifting. For months, I had moved through Stanford like a survivor trying to rebuild. But now, I wasn't surviving anymore. I was positioning. I had power now, not loud, not boastful, but rooted. My voice was no longer a reaction to being hurt. It was an instrument in a symphony of influence, and people were beginning to play it back. The first sign came in the form of a forwarded email from Professor Langston. Fallen. I just spoke with Miriam Chen from the World Bank's Education Policy Unit. She's requesting an interview with you directly for the Global Internship Cohort in DC. Not standard practice, they never fast-track interviews. I suspect your recent speech hit more ears than just ours. Don't blow it. Langston. I sat back stunned. The World Bank. The same institution I'd dreamed of since high school debate team. The one Marla had once joked about applying to just to say she had. Now they were coming to me. The interview was scheduled for that Friday, a video call with 3 panelists, including Miriam Chen herself. She'd spearheaded digital equity reforms in West Africa. Her name carried real weight in every development policy room from DC to Dakar. I spent the next few days preparing obsessively, but not frantically. Everything I needed was already inside me. That was new. The day of the interview, I wore a soft beige blouse, hair pulled into a low bun, and sat in front of a blank wall lit by morning sunlight. I didn't pace. I didn't rehearse. I just breathed. The Zoom window opened. 3 faces appeared. Miriam, a younger man with sharp glasses, and a woman with a kind smile who introduced herself as Irene from their Nairobi office. Miriam spoke first. Fallen, thank you for taking time. Your policy paper on institutional trust gaps has made the rounds internally. I blinked. Thank you, that's incredible to hear. Your story, she continued, is compelling, but it's not the story we're interested in, it's what you did with it. I used it as data, I said. Pain makes a powerful point, but it's what you build with it that changes policy. Miriam nodded once slowly. For 30 minutes, they tested me not on resume fluff, but on ethics dilemmas, implementation tactics, the real cost of mismanaged funding in vulnerable communities. I answered every question not as someone eager to impress, but as someone ready to contribute. At the end, Irene asked the last question. What drives you, Fallen, truly? I didn't pause. Fairness, I said, not just in theory, in design, in consequence. I believe systems must protect the people who don't have a last name that opens doors. I didn't, not really, but I'm still here. And that tells me one thing: the gate doesn't need to stay locked. There was a moment of stillness. Then Miriam smiled. Thank you, that'll be all for now. Click. Call ended. I sat there, hands clasped, heart racing, but not with anxiety. With knowing. 3 days later, I got the email. We are thrilled to welcome Fallen Whitaker to the World Bank Global Internship Cohort 2026. Assignment: International Education Equity Division, Washington, D.C. Supervisor: Miriam Chen. Term: full summer with conditional offer to join the analyst track post-graduation. My hands trembled as I read it, not with fear, with triumph. I burst into quiet laughter. Ryan was the first person I called. He answered on the second ring, his face filling the screen. You got it, he said before I even opened my mouth. I got it, I whispered. He leaned back and grinned. I'm never betting against you again. That night, I took myself out to dinner. Alone. Not as a statement, but as a celebration. I sat at a window table with a view of the glowing trees lining downtown Palo Alto, ordered a glass of wine, and opened a fresh notebook. On the first page, I wrote, Summer 2026, D.C. They tried to write my ending. I rewrote the story. The next few weeks blurred in a whirlwind of logistics, finals, recommendations, and briefings. I met with Langston twice more, both times purely strategic. He now treated me like a peer, not a pupil. Don't let DC turn you into a cynic, he warned. We need idealists with teeth. I've got both, I said. You do, he replied, you really do. 1 week before departure, I received a manila envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, a letter. Marla. Her handwriting was less ornate than before, almost hesitant. Fallen. I heard about DC. I won't pretend I'm happy for you, that would be dishonest, but I will say this. You're better than me. Not because you won, but because you never had to lie to get there. I don't know who I am without shortcuts, you do. And maybe that's the difference between us, I never wanted to see. Good luck. Don't come back smaller, grow louder. I folded the letter once, then slid it into the back of the same folder I had kept since everything fell apart. Not because I needed it, but because it was proof. Proof that I had crossed the river and not drowned. Proof that I didn't burn down a life. I built one. Washington, D.C. greeted me with the sound of motion. Taxis weaving through traffic, espresso machines hissing behind glass storefronts, heels clacking on marble floors inside government buildings. The whole city pulsed, fast, precise, and unapologetically ambitious. You could feel it in the air, the rush to be relevant. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a spectator. I belonged to it. I stepped out of Union Station on a humid June morning, suitcase trailing behind me, hair pulled into a tight knot against the East Coast heat. My internship ID badge was already tucked inside my leather folder, still crisp, unbent. I had found housing with 2 other policy interns, and though we barely knew each other, they looked at me the same way others had started to, like I knew exactly where I was headed. Because I did. My first day at the World Bank felt like stepping into the very pages I used to highlight in college textbooks. Glass elevators glided past 9-story atriums. Every hallway buzzed with conversations in accents from around the globe. Nameplates outside offices listed regions I'd only studied in case briefs. Education policy, human rights, gender equity, digital infrastructure, all alive, all breathing, all real. And in the center of it all, me. Fallen Whitaker. Stanford GSB, Global Equity Fellow, new girl with sharp ideas and a sharper spine. Miriam Chen met me in a conference room on the 6th floor. She wore a navy pantsuit and red-framed glasses, her hair in a twist that never seemed to move. "I don't coddle," she said flatly before even sitting down. "And I don't assign work that's beneath your resume. If you're here, you do real policy, understood?" "Understood," I said. She studied me for a second longer, then smiled a little. "You've got fire, use it to light something useful." She handed me a folder thick with briefs. "Your first project is a comparative report on digital education rollout failures across 3 African states. And if you think it's dry, then you're not reading deep enough." That night I read every page twice. By the end of week 1, I'd drafted an outline so detailed it included post-funding equity decay models and school-to-community trust ratios. Miriam slid it back to me with only one note: "You think like a hammer. Learn to chisel." So I did. I started asking questions, not just in meetings but in elevators, over coffee, in the cafeteria. I found Irene from my interview and asked about field obstacles no brief could explain. She introduced me to a Senegalese analyst who told me about cultural barriers, parental tech literacy, and how aid metrics ignore the simple truth: people don't download policy, they live it. That stuck with me. The more I listened, the more I realized that DC didn't reward speed. It rewarded depth. And that became my new obsession, not just to write good policy, but to make it real. By the second month, Miriam started inviting me into closed-door briefings. I sat in on an interagency roundtable where education reformers argued over how to reach refugee camps in northern Nigeria without disrupting regional governments. Someone asked for field data. Miriam nodded toward me. "Fallen." I blinked once, then opened my folder. "We can't start with tablets if we haven't earned trust. The data shows a 62% dropout spike where foreign tech was deployed without local language onboarding. We're offering solutions to people who haven't even been given a voice." The room went quiet. Then the nods came. One by one. Later, Miriam passed me in the hallway and murmured, "Now you're chiseling." But even as my star rose, the weight of it all began to settle in. Recognition felt sharp, not warm. Not yet. Because I knew something the others didn't. I wasn't just working for global equity. I was trying to make peace with what was taken from me. And what I had taken back. And that duality, that edge, made me sharper, yes, but also restless. Late one night, after a long shift in the office library, I sat at my desk overlooking the Potomac and opened the folder I still kept tucked away, the one labeled Personal Growth. Inside was Marla's last letter. Her words echoing from another life. "Don't come back smaller. Grow louder." I stared at the line. And whispered to no one, "I'm trying." The next morning, I received an invitation to a panel event hosted by Georgetown, a summit on policy ethics in modern institutions. The opening speaker was a Stanford GSB alum. The panelists included 2 World Bank officers, and 1 slot remained open. Miriam handed me the printout. "They asked for someone who lived their policy, not just studied it," she said. "I gave them your name." I blinked. "You sure?" I asked. She tilted her head. "You already gave the speech of your life once," she said. "Time to give it to the right crowd." The night before the event, I didn't sleep much. I ironed my blazer 3 times, rewrote my notes twice. But when I stood backstage at the Georgetown auditorium, I wasn't scared. Not anymore. I walked onto the stage and adjusted the mic. The lights were hot, the room full. I looked out and said, "When I talk about equity, people assume I'm talking about numbers, charts, metrics. But equity isn't math. It's memory. I know what it means to be erased from a system built to protect you. I know what it means to fight your way back into rooms you were born into but shut out of. And I know that the people we write policy for, they don't get second chances if we get it wrong the first time. So don't just write policy. Write remembrance. Write humanity into the margins. Write like you've lost something." When I finished, the silence was heavier than applause. Then it broke. And it came. And this time, it wasn't validation I felt. It was arrival. I returned to Stanford in late August. The air was dry and golden, the eucalyptus trees casting long shadows across the familiar sandstone buildings. Students were trickling back in from summer internships and travel, sunburnt, jet-lagged, glowing with that quiet panic of a new term on the horizon. I rolled my suitcase into the same graduate apartment I'd left 3 months ago. Same keys, same desk, same stack of books still waiting to be reshelved. But I was different. DC had changed something in me, or maybe it had clarified what was already there, the need to fix, to fight, but not from a place of anger anymore, from a place of presence. Within the first 2 weeks back, I was back in Langston's office for a debrief. He asked about the panel at Georgetown, about Miriam's mentorship, about my standing offer from the World Bank post-graduation. "I hope you're not considering anyone else," he said. I smiled. "It's on the table, but I need to breathe first." He nodded. "Just don't forget, they don't want you for your grades, they want you for your spine." I left his office with a sense of something settling into place. I had finally become the woman I imagined when I was just a little girl with a binder full of color-coded tabs and dreams too big for her zip code. And then my mother called. I didn't pick up at first. She texted instead. She wants to meet. Just once. No drama. Says she just wants to talk. I stared at the message for a long time. My phone sat face down on the edge of my desk for a full day. Because I knew what this was. Marla wasn't reaching out to reconnect. She was reaching out to close the loop. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to be part of that anymore. But sometimes healing isn't about what you owe others. It's about what you owe yourself. So I agreed. We met at a small cafe just outside campus, neutral ground. She was already seated when I arrived, no makeup, a plain gray sweater, her eyes were tired but open. She stood as I approached. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey." We sat. The silence between us wasn't hostile anymore. It was just quiet. She sipped her tea. I didn't order anything. Finally, she said, "I saw the video from Georgetown." I met her eyes. "Of course you did. You were brilliant." "Thank you." More silence. Then I wanted to say this in person. What I did with the fund, the lies, the way I handled everything, it wasn't just selfish. It was cruel. I didn't flinch. She continued. "I thought I needed that life more than you did. I thought you'd always be the support beam, not the structure. But you've fallen, you are the whole damn building." The words landed differently now, not like a performance, not like guilt begging for redemption. But like truth. Raw. Wounded. Real. I said nothing. She looked down at her hands. "I'm in a program now, online, slower pace, funded it myself. It's not Stanford, it's not glamorous, but it's mine." I nodded. "Good," I said quietly, "that matters." She looked up. "I don't want to be forgiven. I'm not even sure I deserve it. I wanted you to see me, not the version you've carried since we were kids, just me, messy, stripped down." I exhaled. "I don't hate you, Marla," I said, "but I can't trust you either, and I've stopped waiting for you to become someone who won't disappoint me." Her lips pressed together. She nodded slowly. "Fair." "I'm not saying this to be cruel," I added. "I'm saying it because I need boundaries and you need the truth." She wiped at her cheek with the back of her hand. "I think you always had the truth," she whispered. "You were just the only one who never used it like a weapon." I looked at her, then leaned forward slightly. "I never needed to weaponize the truth," I said. "It was enough to live it." We sat there for a while longer, neither of us speaking. Eventually she stood. "Goodbye, Folland. Goodbye, Marla." She walked out of the cafe into the light, her shoulders not heavy, but not quite free either. Just human. And I sat there alone, staring out the window at the street. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt intact. Whole. Complete in a way that only comes from walking through fire and choosing not to throw it back. That evening, I took the folder marked personal growth out of my drawer, the letters, the screenshots, the trail of ashes. I didn't burn them. I didn't reread them. I just placed the folder at the back of my closet. Not to forget, but because I no longer needed to prove I survived. I had And now I was living. It was raining the morning the offer came through. That soft, steady kind of California rain that feels like it doesn't belong, a quiet mist that drapes itself over sidewalks and tree branches like a secret. I was standing at the kitchen sink in my apartment, bare feet pressed into cool tile, watching condensation bead across the window pane when my phone buzzed. Subject: World Bank Global Analyst Fellowship, official. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I let my fingertips rest against the cool ceramic of my mug. I listened to the silence of the apartment, the absence of Marla, of family tension, of internal war, just rain, breath, space. And then I tapped the screen. Dear Miss Fallon Whitaker, we are thrilled to extend you an official offer to join the 2026 World Bank Global Analyst Fellowship. Your placement will be with the International Education Equity Division, reporting to Miriam Chen. Your courage, clarity, and policy work have distinguished you from an extraordinary pool of candidates. We believe your leadership will shape the future of global education. We look forward to working with you. Sincerely, Alicia DiCarlo, Director of Global Policy Cohorts. I blinked once, twice, then laughed, the kind of deep, breathless laugh that bubbles up from somewhere underneath your ribs, from a part of you that never really believed it would happen. It had. I was no longer chasing legitimacy. I was writing it. And it had nothing to do with Marla. Not anymore. This was mine. Entirely. I forwarded the email to Langston. He replied 10 minutes later. Proud doesn't cover it. Now go build something unbreakable. Later that day, I met with Ryan at our usual bench beneath the eucalyptuses. He saw the smile before I even said a word. You got it. I got it. He didn't ask for details. He just reached for my hand and held it quietly while the rain misted around us. You did it, Fallon. I did more than that, I whispered. I outgrew the cage they put me in. The next few weeks blurred into gentle closure, final papers, a leadership panel, a last ethics committee meeting I helped co-chair. People stopped calling me Marla's sister. Some didn't even know I had one. I didn't correct them. Not out of shame. Out of separation. One afternoon, I stood in the campus bookstore flipping through a Stanford journal on gender equity leadership. My name was on the contributor list. I stared at it, Fallon Whitaker, nestled between scholars, consultants, and people whose names used to intimidate me. Now I stood with them. When I returned to my apartment, I pulled out a single sheet of paper and wrote the words I wished someone had told me 2 years ago. Dear Fallon, you will be tested. Not just by others but by yourself. You'll watch someone take your name, your money, your future, and you will sit with that loss like a stone in your chest. But you'll rise. Not by screaming. Not by destroying. But by becoming. And when you do, you won't just reclaim your place, you'll redefine it. Don't look back. Don't shrink. You blaze. I folded it and tucked it into the back of a new journal. Because my next chapter would need reminders too. Graduation came quietly. No cap and gown parade, no party. Just a private ceremony, a few classmates, and the Stanford seal pressed into ivory paper. I held the diploma in my hands. I looked into the crowd. She was there. Marla. Back row. She didn't wave. She didn't cry. She just stood still and watched. And that was enough. We had done what needed to be done. Now we lived separately. As we always should have. Later, I walked across campus alone, down the stone paths where I had once followed her steps, always a half beat behind. Now I walked ahead. My own rhythm. My own name. When I reached the old fountain at the center of the plaza, the one where incoming students took photos, where seniors posed before goodbye, I sat. I thought of the fund. The lies. The erasure. And how I didn't erase her back. I just rose. Because revenge would have been too easy. But this was harder. This was real. This was earned. And I whispered aloud, not for anyone else but for me. I took my place and I kept it. The boxes came last. 3 taped cartons filled with books, binders, and the mug I always kept near my desk. The one that read "Policy is personal" in chipped gold lettering. I stacked them neatly by the door of my apartment, ready for my flight to DC. It was early morning, the sky still bruised with dawn when I stood in the quiet of my living room, letting it all settle. No more classmates. No more lectures. No more quiet glances in the hallway from people wondering if I was still her sister. Because I was. Not anymore. I had become someone else, someone I chose. And now it was time to leave Stanford behind. But not before saying goodbye on my own terms. I walked to the eucalyptus grove that bordered the western edge of campus. It was empty, most students had already left, and the early mist still clung to the air like memory. I sat on the bench Ryan and I had claimed for the past year and closed my eyes. So many moments played behind my eyelids. The panic in my apartment the day I found out the fund was gone. The hum of the Stanford classroom the first time I stepped behind Marla. The sound of her voice over the phone, full of venom. The crack in it when she finally broke. And the silence since. Not cold. Just finished. I reached into my bag and pulled out the personal growth folder one last time. It had traveled with me everywhere, my anchor, my burden, my evidence. Inside were the final fragments. The printout of the trust fund statement. The anonymous ethics report. Marla's letters. My Georgetown speech. The World Bank offer letter. I took them all out one by one and laid them across the bench beside me. They weren't trophies. They were testimonies. Not of who I fought against, but of who I fought for. Myself. I gathered the papers slowly and placed them back into the folder. Then, carefully, I opened my tote and slid the folder into the bottom. Not for safekeeping, but for filing away. A memory now. No longer a mission. When I rose from the bench, my phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. You're going to build things that last, Fallen. I hope you know that. Call me when you get to DC. I'll bring the dinner, you bring the fire, fire. I smiled, slipping the phone back into my pocket. I walked across campus one last time, letting my fingers trail across railings and stone pillars I once passed like a ghost. Students moved around me now, new faces, wide-eyed, unknowing. One girl stopped me just outside the GSB entrance. You're Fallen, right? I turned, yeah. I watched your Georgetown panel last semester. I'm applying for the same internship track. What you said about rewriting your story, it helped me leave something behind. I smiled softly, then you're already on the right path. She nodded, eyes shining, then walked off. I stood there a beat longer, listening to the birds, the soft rustle of the trees, the quiet buzz of a campus that once tried to swallow me whole and failed. The flight to DC was smooth. I sat by the window, watching clouds swirl beneath me, letting my mind drift forward instead of back. The World Bank lobby felt familiar now. I walked in with quiet command, greeted the receptionist by name, passed security with ease. Miriam met me on the second floor. You're early, she said, gesturing toward my new office. I wanted to start strong. You already did. Inside, the desk was clean, empty, waiting. But I didn't unpack right away. Instead, I opened the top drawer and slid in one item. My Stanford nameplate. A reminder of where I came from, not who I left behind. That fall, my first report went live, Invisible Barriers in Global Access to Digital Literacy. It gained traction, internal praise, and external citation in a UNESCO regional briefing. By winter, I'd spoken at 3 panels, helped draft a funding model for refugee education support, and was assigned my first mentorship pairing, a girl from Nairobi pursuing her MBA. And then came the unexpected email. Subject: Stanford GSB Alumni Series, Legacy in Progress. Dear Fallen, we're honoring 10 graduates who have shown exceptional leadership in redefining ethical pathways into public policy. We'd love to feature you. I stared at the screen. The word legacy blinked back at me. I thought of Marla, how obsessed she used to be with the idea of legacy. But hers was always rooted in image. Mine was built on impact. I wrote back one sentence. Happy to contribute. I built my future one ethical line at a time. The last time I heard from Marla, it was a letter handwritten like the first. No venom this time. Just simplicity. Fallen. I'm not asking for anything anymore. I'm just writing to say you were right. About truth, about fairness, about how legacy isn't what people remember about you, it's what changes because of you. You changed me. I hope in some small way I changed you too. I folded it quietly, placed it at the back of a new file drawer in my DC office. Not in personal growth. In closure. Because the chapter wasn't just finished. It was archived. 1 year later, I stood on the stage of the United Nations Education Forum in Geneva, delivering a keynote to a room full of policy architects and world leaders. I opened with a line I had once whispered to myself in a Brooklyn apartment, the day my world cracked open. They tried to write my ending. I rewrote the story. And the room listened. Not because I was loud. Not because I carried anyone else's name. But because I had earned the right to be heard. Alone. Whole. Unapologetic. And when I stepped down from that stage, someone asked me, Fallen Whitaker, what do you want to be remembered for? I looked them in the eye. And smiled. Not for the fire I walked through, but for what I built after.